Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Ella and I'm delighted to be joined by Daniel Christian, who will be talking to you about Power Platform's deep integration with SharePoint. Remember to join the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC21. Don't forget to check out the Resource Centre. The Resource Centre is updated daily with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. Join us tomorrow for an introduction to PowerShell for SharePoint Week, and keep an eye on the SharePoint Week landing page for loads of new blogs, ebooks, how-to videos, and webinar recordings. Shout out to our webinar supporter for SharePoint Week, Nentex. After the webinar, we will have a question and answer session. Type any question you may have into the question window. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. The webinar will be recorded and you'll be notified by email when it is available. So now I'm going to pass you over to Daniel. Hello, Daniel, how are you?
Hey, Ella, thanks very much. Just doing a mic check. Is everything good on my side?
Yeah, I can hear it. Awesome. I can see your screen.
Wow. All right. Well, I can see we've got 33 attendees over here. So I believe it is afternoon your time. So good afternoon. It is morning my time. It is 9 a.m. Eastern time. So I'm excited. I'm awake, and let's deep dive into the integration of Power Platform. So just a little bit of about me and what do I do. That's my Twitter handle, dchristian19. So if you are on social media, that's where you can search for me. I also have a very active YouTube channel. I post out one video a week on pretty much everything around the Power Platform, a lot around SharePoint. So if you just go to YouTube and you search for Daniel Christian Power Apps or Daniel Christian MVP, that's where you'll find my my YouTube channel. And all right, so let's kind of ease into the whole deep dive integration piece. And I always like anything to do with the SharePoint piece. This just brings a lot of warm feelings to my heart. It's just the history of SharePoint. In my personal career standpoint, it was right at this point, which was the SharePoint portal 2003. That's when my actually career started. That was my first iteration of SharePoint ever. Did lots of migrations in my career, and and gosh, at that time in my life, I never even expected SharePoint Online to be such a thing. But hey, look at where we are right now. So I always like to start with something like this, and depending on who you are, you might have warm feelings, you might have heartaches, but hey, we are here at this point of our lives, and it's always interesting to look back in that. But now let's talk about this whole consolidation in the cloud. So this is another thing I really like to look at, because on the left, if you notice, I've got on-premise, and on the right, I've got Microsoft 365. And then over here, I've broken it down into a lot of things like the forms, the data connections, report applications, and from my, I've been in this tech industry now for over 15 years, and this is the stuff that I have seen in my lifetime, all plugged into SharePoint. And the one thing I really like to focus on is that all of this stuff can actually be consolidated into one of the three: Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI. And then you can break it down into different styles. Like for example, InfoPath Designer can be transferred over or replaced by Power Apps, customized forms, and in SharePoint. Your SharePoint workflows which we built in SharePoint Designer can be built into Power Apps, and so on and so forth. So this is something which has always been an eye-catching thing for people, is just again, from on-premise with all this stuff can go online, depending on customizations and whatnot. There may be some work involved, but this is basically the consolidation piece in the cloud. So I always like to kind of do just a few minutes on that, and then now we kind of go into the Power Platform piece. In the previous slide, I showed you how it was all this on-premise to online, and now once we are online, focusing on the Power Platform, this is how it feels. So the top swim lane is the Power BI, Power Apps, basically the Power Platform family, and the bottom you have all of these things over here. But in this slide, you can actually see that here is actually the sub levels of these things on the bottom, because in the previous slide I just showed data connectors, AI, and that's it. But there's actually different levels to it. All these Azure services are available to you at your disposal. And then you can do it even at a developer level. So, we are right now in this phase of Power Platform, which is about, it's been over 4 years. You will notice that they've actually opened up a little bit more towards the developer piece as well. It's always been a no code, low code, but now they're allowing pro developers to come in. And this is kind of the overview of that, is that where the developers fall in. So I just thought I'd, kind of start with a little bit of that to show you some interesting information, and then kind of wake you up. Definitely woke me up. But here's our whole agenda for today's session, is that Power Platform and its deep integration with SharePoint. And we're going to look at all 4 of these things, some out of the box features, and then also show you some really neat demos over there. So as we can see, it falls into these 4 categories. When it comes to Power Apps, it is a feature or service to act upon data. When it comes to Power Automate, well, it is to automate processes. Power BI is to analyze that data. So any data that you have either automatically or something that you manually acted upon needs to be analyzed. And then finally, you have the latest member of the Power Platform family, which is the Power Virtual Agents, to build that chatbot. Now, chatbots can add data, they can act upon it, but they've also been very good to basically automate providing that data to end users, such that they don't have to go hunting for it. They just have a conversation, and I'll actually have a nice demo for that as well. So let's kind of dive into it a little bit, and we'll kind of keep switching back and forth, because I do have, we'll talk about the one service, and then we'll show some from demos. So let's kind of actually dive upon that. So let's do the first thing. It is the Power Apps, the point to act. Now, what I'm going to do from here is that some of this is going to be, just re-narrating some of the information that you may already be aware of. But if I might just fill in some of the gaps in your knowledge, it's kind of in your best interest to kind of sit back and listen to these things. So when it comes to Power Apps, and again, remember, everything is going to be SharePoint specific today. That's the agenda, deep integration with SharePoint. So all of these services that I will talk about SharePoint, but it'll be SharePoint's deep integration with other services as well. And you will see in my 2 demos that I talk about. So when it comes to Power Apps and its acting functionality, right now, as we stand, there are 2 ways you can use Power Apps. It is the customized form, and it is a Canvas app. And I'll show you the demos of both of them, because there's fundamental differences between the 2. When it comes to customized forms, it is already built into a SharePoint list, and I'll show you that in a demo in just a minute. And the functionality of that is that you go to a SharePoint list, you go and right there in the SharePoint list itself, start building the form, and it does have a very similar resemblance as far as at least the building piece and the integration piece to what InfoPad Designer used to be at one time. You didn't have to, go somewhere in one website and build it. It was already tied into your SharePoint list. So that's the whole concept of customized form. But there are some limitations to that. Right now, as we know, the Power Apps Canvas Studio, which comes with the SharePoint list, it's a limited version. It's a light version of the Canvas Studio, and you can actually go right now and see that if you were to open up the Canvas Studio directly from a SharePoint list, you don't have the option to do any save as. You don't have the option to do any export. I mean, it will save, and it will save and directly tie that into the SharePoint list. And so, it doesn't have all that features and that functionality over there. In fact, let's, even think about the next thing, is that when it comes to a SharePoint list and the customized forms, it is a prime example to add and edit data from a form perspective. Not a very powerful tool when it wants to go ahead and do gallery viewing and filtering and everything. The customized form is not the place for that. Why? Because you already have a SharePoint list. You already have a search. The list already has that functionality. So let me actually kind of show you an example of that. All right, I'm going to get out of here, and let's go and take a look at an example that I have. So here you go. Here is your SharePoint list. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward list, but I've also added a few other complexities to it, and I call them complexities because I've got lookup columns over here, and I've got a manage metadata type column. So I've kind of tried to make it a little bit more real life situation, because let's face it, this does happen. You have these type of lists, and if you've heard consultants on this call, on this this webinar, then that sometimes You just have to deal with what your customer offers. They may not have the best list, they may not have the best design, but you gotta work with what you have. And so here's the example, because right now if I go ahead and were to, come on mouse, wake up, right? Click on the new, this is that customized form that I slide in. So this is not the built-in SharePoint form. This is the customized form built from an from a Power Apps Canvas Studio. And it's actually pretty neat. I mean, I'm able to go ahead and work on the form settings just like the way it should be. If I went ahead and turned on the toggle switch, it is able to unhide these other columns. I can go ahead and fill all this information in the form, submit it. Pretty neat, pretty straightforward. I can go ahead and select an existing form and I can go and do an edit, and the other form will actually show up right over there. Once my mouse picks up again. So, click on that, and the existing form, which is already there, the data or the list item already shows up over here. So it's very simple, it's very intuitive. But again, from the standpoint is that it's built as a form only, hence the term customized form. So in that customized form, you don't want to go ahead and add a gallery. You don't want to go and do any filtering, because then you start running into delegation problems. Delegation means it'll only have, pulling only this much information, not more than a certain amount of information. Sometimes the formulas may not work very well because, again, you are only focusing from a form perspective. So the next question that will come to my mind is, well, Daniel, it's a form. Well, how do I do all these other table things? Because, you've actually got some nice videos on how to go ahead and do tables and make galleries look like tables. I want to do all of that. I want to do search. So why are you telling me that it's not available in the SharePoint customized form? Well, it is still available, but your SharePoint list does it all. You've got a full search feature, full fidelity search feature available for your SharePoint list. You've got a full filter functionality available over here for your SharePoint list. So it's already there out of the box. Therefore, you don't need to add that into your customized form, because the customized form is really good for an added functionality. So I always like to call that out over here, is that there's scenarios where you need to use that customized form as against where you don't want to use the customized form. And this is one of those scenarios. Now, just to add on to that, when you use this customized form, remember you can't export and import that, so kind of keep that in mind. And this is one of those scenarios where for sure your users are going to be desktop users. Then go ahead and go down that customized form situation. You don't want to focus too much on building that Canvas apps over there, because if you know that the users of the SharePoint list are going to be combinations of each of them, people on the road who are mobile and desktop, that's when you want to go ahead and start looking at a mobile app perspective or a tablet perspective. But this is just that one simple scenario of going ahead and leveraging the SharePoint list piece. All right, so let's go ahead and continue talking about our the Canvas app. So in the Canvas app, it is a standalone app which can be embedded into a SharePoint list. Also, it is a full version of the Power Apps Canvas Studio. So you don't get only that, the limited version that we talked about, the SharePoint list. It is a full version, which means you can go ahead and export it out. You can go ahead and package it together and stuff like that. It's a full fidelity version of that. Now, I've also seen many a times, especially from the consulting side, people have made that really good guesstimate, is that even though their customers have said that, hey, most of the time, more than likely the users will just be a desktop people, and so it's fine if you use a customized form. What I have seen people do is they'll go ahead and actually build a Canvas form, and they'll embed that into a SharePoint list. And there's there's the widget for that. And so again, end users don't know the difference. They think, oh, that is a customized form on my SharePoint site. But suddenly you might have that situation, especially if you have executive people or those, again, who are traveling. They'll be like, Daniel, this is an awesome form. I really wish I could look at that from my tablet. And that's when you just say, you know what, you can, here's the app, just go ahead and download the Canvas App Studio and you can start using it. And that's when you become an instant hero overnight, is because you just thought ahead of that. So it's a little tidbit that I'm throwing out to you, is that if you are in that situation where you have that, maybe it's like, what if that situation where people are going to be traveling and they need that mobile, then still use that same SharePoint list, but don't go to the list to open up the form like I just demoed. In fact, build the Canvas app and go ahead and build that embedded into still a SharePoint page. and it'll still be treated like a online SharePoint, SharePoint form. And so here's the example about the SharePoint form that I have. So here's one where now I've got this Power Apps. It is a Power Apps form. And I've actually done this in information. I mean, interesting thing is, if you don't already know, you can go ahead and build the Power App, and you add this little post script. So yeah, right now, if I've gone ahead and shown it this way, oh yeah, Daniel, that's a Power Apps form. I know it's Power Apps because I can see that nice top ribbon over there. But if you go to the URL all the way to the end, and if you do the and hide nav bar equals true, if you do that, it will actually even hide that ribbon. And so unless and until people like you who are on this video right now, you're savvy, right? You will actually look at the URL, it's like, oh yeah, that's a Power Apps one. But an everyday user may not see that, and they won't even know that this is a Power Apps one. So it's a little tidbit that I'm throwing out your way. But this is actually not a bad form over here. I can go ahead and do all the other things. I'm actually seeing the information. In fact, this is very similar. By the way, the backend SharePoint list is the exact same. Just to prove that point is that you can use that customized form that I just showed you, or you can do something like this. It's the very exact same. You can go ahead and fill in the information. It'll go ahead and do all of that. I can go ahead and save it. Just do all that fun jazz thing over here. So this is the whole concept between the customized form and the going ahead and using a Power Apps form, keeping in mind all these other things and that little tidbit that I threw out over there. All right, so let's keep going. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit. Oops, I got out of that one. Switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about the actual Power Automate. So in the Power Automate piece, we knew that Power Automate was the successor of the SharePoint Designer piece, and we still know that SharePoint Designer exists. But there's a lot more involved in Power Automate that we are not able to do. We didn't have that functionality to do. So besides the fact that you can go ahead and build flows and do all that jazz, when it comes to SharePoint, you have this functionality called Get Items. And I always emphasize on this Get Items pieces because to this day, I still see people who are building flows, and when they build flows, they are calling all the SharePoint lists that they need, and then they do the filtering inside the flow. This way, excuse me, this way you are able to go ahead and do a filtering using an OData filter query, and you do that filtering on the server side. The reason it's on the server side is that I'm going ahead and saying that, hey, I just want to get a selected column whose value is so and so, and just pull that information. And you've just saved yourself so much amount of flow run time just by doing that get items. And so all of this is really doable because SharePoint is a delegable data source. Delegable means it is actually, you can actually delegate all these type of functions and calls on the server side, and therefore it only pulls the limited number of information that you need. And that's one of the biggest perks right now of SharePoint lists, because it's a delegable data source. In fact, there's only 4 right now as we stand delegable data sources. Of the 500 and some connectors that we have, there's only 4 that are delegable data sources, and SharePoint is one of them. So something to be really proud of, that you have this feature and that functionality over here in the Power Automate side. But when we come to the demo, I'll show you some really neat things around that. All right, so let's now switch gears a little bit and talk about Power BI. Now, in Power BI, you've got, Power BI has always been what I call the big brother. Big brother because it was one of the first iterations of the Power Platform that came out. Power BI came out, what, 2 years before Power Apps and Power Automate. So there's been a lot of things that were tried and tested on Power BI, and Power Apps and Power Automate kind of learned from its mistakes. And then, I could have a whole separate session just on this topic itself, but it's been very interesting to see how much Power Apps and Power Automate has adopted from that. But I really like the fact that right now, as we stand, there is actually a whole section on a SharePoint list called Integrate. And in Integrate, you can go ahead and have Power Apps, Power Automate, and then you have Power BI. And Power BI does automatic visualization of a list. Let me show you what that is. If I go to one of my SharePoint lists, and the SharePoint list that I have has actually got quite a lot of data in it. This information is actually a SharePoint list that has actually, let's go take a look. It's what's called the North Carolina Department of Transportation. North Carolina is the state that I actually live in the United States. And right here it has 44,735 list items. So there's a lot of data. And right now, when we come to that list, I go to integrate. In my integrate, I go ahead and do Power BI, and it gives you the functionality to visualize this list. Well, what does visualize this list mean? Well, let's go try it. So keeping in mind that it's got 44,000 items in it, it is actually right now as we stand, it is taking that data, massaging it, and it's telling you this is the best way right now. It tells you that you can view this data. And it's actually pretty good. I mean, in just one click, 44,000 items, all right? It's not 440, 44,000 items over there. It was able to go ahead and massage the entire data really fast and at least present it in this way. And it gives you even a full summary count right there. It also gives you flexibility to go ahead and do some nice, viewing perspective. I want to do a high contrast. Well, there you go. It's got a nice high contrast functionality. I can go ahead and put in just the white as you want. Gives you some flexibility over here, and also gives you the ability to go ahead and do some filtering and whatnot. All of this was in one click. And so that's one of the neat things that I like about that functionality in Power BI. And then you can go ahead and save it and present that in directly in in your SharePoint list as well. So that's kind of the built-in piece which I like about the Power BI. In fact, a thought just came to my mind is that when it comes to the Power Automate, in fact, Power Apps and Power Automate, you've got the same functionality in Power Automate as well. You can go and create your flow directly over here, or you can go and see any existing flows that you have built in Power Automate and present that over here. This integrate is one of my personal favorites. It's directly on the ribbon, and it just now shows you in there what are all the features available. Who knows, in the future we might even have Power Virtual Agents directly tied into that, because you can build a Power Virtual Agent with the SharePoint list, and I'll actually demo that to you in just in a few minutes. So that's pretty neat as far as the Power BI piece that directly comes into it. And now let's talk a little bit more on the Power Virtual Agent side. So when it comes to the Power Virtual Agents, it was, like I always said, was the latest member of the Power Platform family. So if you want to look at, like, it's already almost 5 years now since everything has gone GA. Power Virtual Agents has been the last one. And when it comes to the SharePoint side, you can do it a couple of ways. You can embed that into a SharePoint site, which I'll show you in just a second. And then you can also go ahead and use Power Automate to let the flow get the information that it needs. And this is actually a great time for me to talk about what that means. Is that there's two types of chatbots that you can build in Power Automate, and I've always this is something that I've always explained it when I'm doing workshops and working with people, is that there are literally two types of bot systems. One is a static bot, and the other one is a dynamic bot. So what does that mean? Static bot is you go ahead and design the bot such that it has everything in the bot. All the questions are as text in the bot, all the answers are as text in the bot. And the bot will be really savvy. It'll take all the questions, it will give you all the answers. If answers might have links in them, and that is it. It doesn't do anything else after that, which also means that if you need to go ahead and do any kind of updating, any kind of changes, you've got to open up that bot and go ahead and update all that conversation. So for example, you've got links in that bot, and the bot has been providing that helpful links to the end users it's chatting with. The link changed. Well, now you got to open up the bot. You got to go to that section of the conversation, update that link, publish it again. Well, right now, so that's one way of doing it. The other way, which I call, is dynamic bot, and that's the bot I'll be actually demoing to you all. The content is that the framework, the design of the bot is actually 100% perfect. You don't have to tweak anything, depending on how the question comes or depending on what the options the user clicks. What it does is it goes to a back-end SharePoint list, and it'll do that get items information, the get flow that I talked about. It will go and get filter just the exact information that we need, and then it pulls it back over here. And that is why I call it dynamic, because your bot's framework is perfect. The logic of the bot is perfect. What always needs to be done is update the data, which means you're only updating that SharePoint list, which means you don't even have to touch the bot. So this is one of those examples where you can actually have a really good synergy between your IT professionals who are the bot makers and the bot builders, but at the same time, your IT savvy people is like, hey, I'm not as good enough to build a bot, but I can handle the data piece, the SharePoint data piece. So just tell me where the list is, and I'll keep updating that. And that synergy is actually a really great example over there. So now that I've given you an overview of all these, 4 different members of the family, let's talk about how we can do some integration. And we're going to jump into doing some demos over here. And I've actually got 2 really good demos to show you. And in the mix, I'll throw in Microsoft Teams as well. And we're going to show all this holistic approach from a SharePoint standpoint. So here's the first one that I'm going to show you, is that how I can use the combination of Power Virtual Agents with SharePoint and also leverage Power Automate. So let's kind of jump into that demo. So I'm going to go in now to one of my tenants, and right here is my SharePoint site. And in my SharePoint site, I've embedded a I've embedded a chatbot. In fact, it is my SharePoint bot. So in my SharePoint bot itself, I'm going to start, having a discussion. So let's actually even look at the scenario here. The scenario is this is a company, and the company gives you hardware, devices, assets basically for your technology work. And what we want to do is instead of providing a website with an FAQs or a list or a page to tell your employees that, hey, this is the a place where you can just go and get a catalog of what are the device options available, so you can actually which will help you make a firm decision of which device you would need. Like, do you need a tablet? Do you need a desktop? Do you need a laptop? Based on your work. But instead of viewing a catalog, why don't we just have a chatbot discussion? So you can actually, the bot will tell you what it is that options you have, and then you can go and do and picking and choosing based on that. So let's actually go through some examples over here. In this case, I'm going to start coming in and say, hey, looking into devices. All right. So I just go and do that. The bot takes that information and says, hi there, I am your friendly SharePoint neighborhood bot. Did you get that? Friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. That's where I stole that idea from. Friendly SharePoint neighborhood bot. And then it's asking, what type of manufacturers are you interested in? I want to pause away and start even sharing you some of these tidbits that I use to build these bots. The Power Virtual Agent, the chatbot system, does have natural language understanding. What that means is I can literally have a full-blown conversation just by having natural language. I mean, you can actually start saying, I'm looking for Acer, I'm looking for Dell. But if you want your bot to be 100% like really smart and avoid any rooms for any errors, I always lean towards this choice option over here. That has helped my bot to be 100% successful from the get-go. Because you can always have that scenario, like the Acer versus the Asus sometimes can be a little bit challenging for the natural language standpoint. And what if you made a spelling mistake? Then you're challenging the bot again from its natural language understanding. So as much as possible, I've kind of leveraged this choice option because it also has made it very easy for the users. Like especially if you're doing this from a mobile device, then in that case, you don't have to do any typing in, with your thumbs. You just got to go ahead and hit the button. So using these type of choice options has been a very win-win situation for me. All right, so I'm going to say, okay, I'm using Dell. So in the Dell now, then it knows, great, Dell is a fine choice. Next, what type of devices would you need or would you like? Now, this is, again, very dynamic choices that he's given me, because what's happening is if I would have selected, say, Microsoft, then in the Microsoft side, I only have a laptop and tablet. That's all I have right now. So the options that it would provide for Microsoft would be completely different. So it's a very dynamic type of conversation and interface that is going on. So I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to actually select a laptop. So now based on that laptop now, it is going ahead. Right now, as we know it, it ran a flow. The flow went ahead and said that, hey, the user is going ahead and searching specifically 2 items, a Dell device manufacturer and the device type is a laptop. Then the flow went ahead and ran through the entire SharePoint list, got all that information and sent it back to the Power Automate. And now here is all of it. So the collaboration piece is fantastic. Having the conversation, like an informal conversation going on, is really fantastic, because now the user didn't have to, read through the catalog or even, do any searching or download a PDF file and view it. No, this was a full-blown conversation going on. Now you can have more conversations too. In fact, the next thing you could do with the bot is the bot can come and say, do you need to see anything else? And you can say, nope, I'm done. But let's kind of open this up and see how this actually worked. So here's just a quick 30-second overview of what the Power Virtual Agent is. Now in the Power Virtual Agent, you can come in, Power Virtual Agents are also just like Power Automate, broken down into different environments. So I come to my environment. In my environment, I actually have this bot system that I've built. So in my bot system, you have what's called as topics. And topics is, as the name suggests, is that what is the topic of conversation where the chatbot is engaged with the user. That's literally what that topic is. So the one that we just tested, that topic is called device catalog. And so in the device catalog, when I go in, that's what it is. The topic is device catalog. And here are all the triggers that you put in. Triggers, just like the name suggests, is where you go ahead and start a conversation, what it is that you do for conversation. So I had actually put into effect something along this lines, like looking into devices, or but you don't have to be 100% exactly what this thing, because it understands that natural language conversations that you have. So I could just put in, hey, I could say, hey, I am looking for devices, and it would still pick that up, and it would go and trigger the conversation. So this is all about triggers. Now let's go ahead to doing the authoring of the converse. Authoring actually means that you're going to go and build the logic of the device. So let me just go and close this off a little, so we've got a little bit more room. I could have done clicking the hide bot as well. So by default, it went ahead and did the triggering. These are the triggers that we did. After that, it has a message, and the message is the same thing we saw. It says, hi there, I am your friendly SharePoint neighborhood bot. So as you can see, you've got full access to really tweak this conversation and make it more personal with that. I could go ahead and even do some, adding some variables. So instead of saying hi there, it would know who the person is having a chatbot conversation in. If anybody's, like in this case, are on a SharePoint site, they are authenticated, which means they have access to that SharePoint site. If you're authenticated, we know what the username is, the display name. You can put that in over here. You can actually make it more personal. I can say, hi, this is Daniel, and who, what is it that you're looking for, and so on and so forth. And so here is the place where we have that conversation now. In the the conversation really starts. And I always started with asking that question. So here was the point, is I went ahead and chose the multiple choices option. I have other options to work with. I could go ahead and do the user's entire response, where the user actually goes and types in, and then we can able to go ahead and let the intelligence make a good guesstimate on what it is that you're searching against. So those were the different options over there. And I said, for my valid reasons, I've always gone with the choice options. But neat thing is, whatever the user put in, it went ahead and actually saved it to a variable, because I'm going to call that variable later on. So after that, based on, regardless of which one I select, whatever I select, I'm just going and doing a few more conditions. The first condition is that, hey, if it is a, either regardless of which one I selected, you've got to go down this path. So I could, well, one of the things it did is that when I went more of these that I add, anytime I add a choice, it automatically goes ahead and creates a condition for me. And I kind of really like that, almost like an IntelliSense situation, because it makes this whole, building the logic so intuitive that if I were to now go ahead and add another one of these logics, it actually automatically went ahead and dropped this one right here. That's pretty neat, because it just makes a guesstimate that, hey, Daniel's actually adding another option over there. Let me just go and prepare a condition and keep it ready for Daniel. It's just really simple and really intuitive. So just thought I'll kind of show that over there to you. So anyway, after I've gone and done that, regardless in the situation, since it already had it, I went in and just tied them all up. And then now I know that, hey, okay, this is the manufacturer, because I've saved the manufacturer the variable. And this is how I was able to say great, because remember when I did the testing, it was saying, great that you selected the Dell laptop, because Dell is the one I selected. See, great, Dell is a fine choice. This is how it came. Great, the variable is a fine choice. And then based on that, it was able to go ahead and pull in, what type of device it is, device type options that you have. And then here is where the magic happened for pulling that information. So this is that deep integration piece. Like now we are starting to talk about the deep integration, because I just showed you, I give you not so I give you a good slide deck over there to show you about, or give you an overview. But now you kind of understand that, okay, there was Power Apps, Power Automate, there was Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents, and that along with SharePoint List is how we're able to achieve this. So what's happening now is I have taken information about getting the values from the person I have a conversation with. I got the value of the manufacturer. I got the value of the device type. After that, it went ahead and ran this flow and it sent me all this information. So let's go take a look at that flow. So I'm going to click on it, and that's actually one of my favorite features that it wasn't there from the get-go, but I had to submit some requests, and I gave some advice to the PVA product group, and then they added that link. That link is very helpful because it actually goes ahead and now takes you directly into the Power Virtual Agents related flow. And this is what it is. It's a flow that's running. In fact, you can see we just ran one 6 minutes ago. So let's go take a look at that, logic of the flow. It's a pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but let's go take a look at it. So the trigger is from Power Virtual Agents. In the trigger, I'm getting two things. I'm getting the manufacturer and I'm getting the device type. Now we are using the get items. See that screenshot that I showed you about how get items is? Here it is. This is the beauty of how you can use SharePoint with Power Automate, because it comes with these features. So it went ahead, to the SharePoint site that I have. I actually have a SharePoint list. It's this one right here. It's the SharePoint list. It's got all that information about the device type, the device brand name, and all this asset information. I mean, this is all coming from a SharePoint list. It just went and pulled that information. In fact, in the thumbnail over there, it's not showing. I just have URLs of the images. So that's why in the conversation, the images showed up over here as well. It's one of my favorite things of how I can even leverage SharePoint lists for even having a chatbot conversation, using the flow as the intermediate connector for that. So in the get items, if you go to advanced options, this is where I do the OData filtering. OData filtering, which means I'm doing a server-side filtering, telling on the server, the SharePoint online server, wherever it is, hey, I don't pull all the information. Just get me anything that has to do with the devices whose manufacturer was Dell, and if the device type is a laptop. It went ahead and did the filtering, and it pulled all that information in. I'll share some tidbits with you all. This information over here, you see that variable and you see that variable, that's coming from what the user clicked in the chatbot. These MFR and the device equals, those are the actual column types which are coming in from the SharePoint. So MFR is for manufacturer, is a column type in SharePoint. That's actually coming in from here. See that MFR? And then the device, that's a column type in SharePoint. So it's actually going and getting that information. So that's how I do that. Now, we saw in the example that a lot of information was being built. And so for that, we are using a very specific variable, the concept of variables in Power Virtual Agents. I'm going to use it as a string type. And then in the string type, I know a lot of information is coming in, so I'm doing an apply to each. These apply to each, the way you're applying or appending all that data into that string variable is called as a markdown design. The reason for it's called markdown is because we don't know what it is. It's not HTML, it's not XML, it is a markdown design. So it's very specific, excuse me, it's very specific that you put this formatting and this, I wouldn't even call it code because it's just not code. It's basically what it's saying is that the first one on the top should be a 1, and that's not a 1 as in the number 1. That's just saying that, hey, that's the starting one. Then you can go ahead and, whatever other formatting that you do, it's pretty simple from a formatting standpoint, because I just want the same spaces. So it's not HTML or anything like that. The only big thing is like if you want an image instead of a URL, then you add this alt text, inside the brackets, and then you put that, the URL over there, and then it creates that image. So it's this markdown design is actually pretty simple, but it's very picky. You make any slight change and you don't follow the protocol, you won't get an image. You'll just get a URL. So kind of keep that in mind. In fact, I've got a whole video on just that, and I've gone deep dive step by step in that, so you can always go check that out. But here's the syntax that you can actually look at from a very specific standpoint. It's called the markdown design. So now that we've got this variable loaded up with as much information as we need, and as you know, in the demo, we had lots of Dell stuff coming in, it goes ahead and sends it back. And so that's basically what happened. It now, the flow ran, it returned, it says it gives value to, what was that variable over here? That variable is the same one that we sent from flow. And as we returned it, all I did was go ahead and say, that's the message, because I pasted that variable. And that's how the whole conversation happened in that SharePoint site. With this as the backend, you had, the chatbot going on. The chatbot that we built, the chatbot was leveraging Power Automate to do the filtering to get on the information, and the filtering was coming from SharePoint. So let's think about this deep dive information. We were on a SharePoint site, all right? We had a Power Virtual Agent bot directly embedded into our SharePoint site. In the conversation, the natural language conversation, we were using Power Automate, and Power Automate was going and pulling the data from that SharePoint list to just show all this information. It was actually a really good deep integration piece. One of my favorite things that I like about this is because now you don't have to create a site with FAQs. Excuse me. You don't have to have a PDF catalog file. You just have a very SharePoint list, and then you can go and update that while the bot can have a really good carry-on conversation with the end users. It works really well. It's so user-friendly, and now you can go and tweak all this. Because remember that example that I showed about the dynamic bot? That once you've really tweaked the framework of your bot, that framework or that logic is sound. All you have to do is go ahead and keep updating that SharePoint list. And so the IT pros who build the bot, build it, great, you're done. Hand that list over to your savvy IT office users, and let them just update the SharePoint list. You've kind of built that really good synergy between the IT pros versus the tech savvy people. So one of my favorite things about the Power Virtual Agents and its deep integration with SharePoint is the demo that I just showed you. But let's not stop over here. Let's now go and take a look at one level even higher. So let me jump over to, okay, so here is my full Power BI report. And if any of you who follow a really good friend, like a brother of mine, Reza Dorani, him and I have a YouTube channel. We go ahead and do that. This is how we monitor all our lack of a better term fans. What they do is they tweet hashtag R&D show, and they go and comment, they ask us questions, they are complimenting. I'm picking up all of these things. So this is Power BI. All right, now let's talk about this really deep integration, because we're going to hit everything. We're pretty much going to hit all 4 members of the Power Platform family. We're going to use Twitter as a connector, and we're going to take it one step further. We're going to do it in we'll talk about Microsoft Teams as well. So right now I have a flow. A flow is running very similar to the ones that we just saw. It gets triggered by hashtags, and this is our hashtag R&D show. In fact, while you are, I'm here, if you were to tweet in Twitter with that hashtag, any second it'll pick it up and show it over here as well. Just thought if you're interested in playing around with that. But so that's what's happening. The flow went ahead and picks up the hashtag, saves it on the data source, which is a SharePoint list, and I've used that SharePoint list to present it in this information. Now I can go ahead and view it. I can see, wow, what happened specifically on that one day. Like, why was there a big spike? Oh, that was the day we actually had the live event. It was a Friday, and people were just applauding us for that. I can go ahead and do the toggle switching around just to filter it down to see what happened on that specific day. Here's the sentiments, closer to 1, they are 100% positive, and so on and so forth. So let's now take this to the next level. Okay, I've Power the connector with Twitter is working well. Flow is picking up all the hashtags, and I'm presenting that directly inside in Power BI. But what I want to do is I want to have the flexibility where I can go ahead and now, while I'm monitoring all of these tweets, I can actually do some investigation. So how does that work? Well, now I've gone ahead and put in Power Apps. I've got directly Power Apps. So like, keep in track. We've got the connector Twitter, Flow picking that up, Power BI, and that's what we was. I already got Flow in Power BI. Now I'm putting in directly Power Automate as well over here. So we've covered that much piece as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that, okay, I've got there are certain conversations that I'm going through, and I really want to applaud this user over here. He's really a great guy. Biden, he actually builds us every week. He will go ahead and build a nice thumbnail, and he'll post it on social media for us. So what I want to do is I want to tell our social team is that, hey, we really need to applaud this guy. And that social team has a team in Microsoft Teams and their own channel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it. And the moment I selected it, it went ahead and highlighted that in the Power Apps. This is basically just the gallery. I go ahead and now select that in the gallery. and it is based, this is just an edit form. The edit form is saying, okay, already went ahead and grafted Bearden's Twitter handle, when the message was tweeted, what the message is. And then here, I'm actually going to go ahead and add a message, and I'm going to say, we need to give a huge shout out to Bearden. It's Bearden in the next live meeting. All right, so that's just a comment that I'm adding, and I'm going to click on submit, and it's asking me, are you sure? I'm going to say yes, and it went ahead and saved it directly on Microsoft Teams. And there you go. This is it. This is my Microsoft Teams. We actually have the Power Apps Champions Teams. In Power Apps Champions Teams, there is a channel called Social Media, and this is it, 9:43 a.m. See, I've got 9:44 a.m. So that's the message that I just posted. So you see how this is coming through? It's actually going ahead and directly posting it through that Power Apps inside that Power BI, posting it to Microsoft Teams. And over here, it gives me this additional information. Since I posted it, it's coming in from me, Daniel Christian. Then it also went ahead and put in my comment right there. This is my comment. And then afterward, it also goes and shows that entire tweet over there with the links and everything. This is deep integration. I mean, it doesn't get any more deeper than this, because we've leveraged a lot of things. Now, what I could also do, and in fact, I'm already doing it, is I'm using AI and machine learning for that sentiment. So if you go back to our Power Apps, this section of the AI and machine learning is coming in direct. I mean, the sentiment values are coming in from the AI and machine learning. I'm actually getting the sentiment values. In fact, I've done a whole video on that as well, if you're interested. But that's another, Power Automate, leveraging the sentiment value, another deep integration. The framework is SharePoint. All the data is being stored in SharePoint. Initial calls that are coming in directly from the tweets, saving it in SharePoint. Going ahead and updating it with the sentiment value, saving it in SharePoint. We've just used this data source is a SharePoint list. Flow is going ahead and getting it from Twitter, saving it into a SharePoint list. This Power Automate is going ahead and putting all these updated information, like the comments will be put on SharePoint list. We've just done that full synergy, literally gone around that entire path of how we are able to use Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, connectors and all of this to build a solution like this. So it's pretty neat. And I kind of wanted to kind of just show this example of how we were able to go ahead and leverage this all information over here. So in closing, I do want to call out this one question, which comes to me a lot, is that, Daniel, if SharePoint is so great, then why do I keep hearing about Microsoft Dataverse? So here's the answer. I love this Bart Simpson one. We actually used it in one of our meetings. SharePoint is not a relational database. So what does relational database mean? Relational database means you cannot take a SharePoint list and say, hey, this column is actually coming from that column, and then that column automatically pulls it in. So yes, I know some of you SharePoint points like, Daniel, wait a minute, there is a lookup column. Lookup columns do that. Yeah, but lookup columns don't actually pull in the same type of relational stuff that you can do with, say, SQL databases or even Access databases. SharePoint doesn't do that. Dataverse does that. So keep that in the back of your mind. If you are really good with SharePoint lists, and if you're already built your relationship, you've planned your SharePoint list, then great. In fact, I've done a 4-part, and so I don't want to sound like a rude person saying SharePoint's not the one to do, use database. No, because I myself have done a 4-part video of how to plan your SharePoint lists. In fact, it's one of my highest seen videos, because I know people are going to stick with SharePoint for so many reasons, right? We are not going to dive into that piece. And therefore, if you want to use SharePoint, plan a really good list, and go take a look at those 4 videos of mine. But if you are one of those people where you really says, Daniel, all I need is an app. I don't care about the data sources. I just happen to attend this session of yours. So if I'm one of those people and I'm not really, looking at saving it in SharePoint or looking at saving it in SQL, I am going to build a full-blown app. Well, then you can look at it from a Dataverse standpoint as well. There's a little bit of work involved. Same thing. You're building tables just like you're building lists, but you've got this flexibility now to do these lookups and all of the other jazz. So I always want to point this out. As much of a fan of SharePoint I am, my career is set because of SharePoint. I do want to call this out, that SharePoint is not a relational database. So you want to plan accordingly. And 90% of the time, people have used existing SharePoint lists to build an app. And in that case, you might just not have the time or the expense to build a database. And I completely get it. That may not be an option. So hopefully this video was helpful for you. As a recap, we went down over the entire circle of the Power Platform. We looked at Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, Power Virtual Agents, and how at the core of it was SharePoint. We looked at some great demos. We looked at Power Virtual Agents chatbot system, how it was able to leverage the SharePoint list and Power Automate to get the information instead of building a boring FAQ list or a catalog. This was a nice conversation to actually get some device information. And then we went and looked at that other example, which was a big example. Power BI is showing a report of a flow running, picking up hashtags, but then we were able to put in Power Automate to specifically select a comment and then post that into Teams, that big integration piece. So hopefully this was helpful. Again, that's my Twitter handle, that's my YouTube channel. Feel free to ping me on social media over there. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn and ping me over there. But other than that, do we have any questions come in? This is the time for Q&A.
Someone said, would it take long to set up their own Power BI report? I'm looking at like social media and hashtags as they're a beginner.
Honestly, it doesn't take that much time because there are all these widgets available. So since we do have some time, let me show you that. It's a great question. Let's go back to my report over here. And I was just viewing it from the browser. Let's go ahead and do an edit. And now you have all these visualizations. So each of them is a visualization. So when I click on it, you will actually see that, hey, this is actually a graph type visualization, which is coming in. This is one of these graphs. If you see there, that's a graph. It's just stacked column chart visualization. So that's how it works over here. This thing is just a very simple table visualization. And one of the neat things about Power BI is as long as your data source is coming, your data source needs to be set up in its relationships. I just have one SharePoint list, so I didn't have to worry about relationships. This is my SharePoint list relationships coming in. It's just very simple columns. And then after I went ahead and pull that information in, you can do this thing. Is like, hey, for each and every one of these controls, they are kept so that the filters will work at that screen level. What that means is that if I were to go ahead and now select this one, say for example, I selected that one itself had a total reach of 70, which means when that tweet was made, it reached 70 people. See, but all of this automatically gets filtered based on that, and it happens automatically. You literally just drag and drop, and in my case, since I only had one SharePoint list, I didn't have to do any relations or any connections at all. And this is all out of the box. I mean, I didn't have to upload any widgets. The Power Apps piece also is actually a built-in widget. For the Power Apps piece, the only thing is you got to go to get more visualizations, and then you go ahead and search for Power Apps. In my case, it may not show up because I already have it. Yeah, it'll show up over here, Power Apps. You click on it, and that visualization gets added over there. But it's literally there's no coding I had to do over there, no formulas and anything like that. It was all drag and drop. And then the only additional work I did was, again, from my UI perspectives, I came over here and I spent a lot of time cleaning this up. It's like, okay, I wanted the style to be default, but I wanted this format, this coloring, and so on, because I have a branding color that I was following. That's honestly where I spend the most time. So hopefully this will help you and kind of give you a good idea, is that I didn't have to do a lot. It was all drag and drop.
Perfect. So the next question is, what is or is not deployable through a pipeline, brackets regarding Power Apps / Power Automate, BI, and virtual agents?
That is a very open-ended question. So what is not deployable?
Through a pipeline.
Through the pipeline. Are you talking about the whole application ALM process, lifecycle management? I think the person is referring to that. So through the ALM process, there is not much limitations at all. I will tell you is that right now the ALM process is fairly new for Power Virtual Agents. You can go ahead and build, and if you ask that question, I'm assuming you already know what solutions are. Power Apps, the Power Platform has a concept of solution. So when it comes to just building,
they followed up there and said Azure DevOps equals pipeline to deploy on the different environment.
All right, gotcha. Right, so yeah, you were talking about the solution standpoint. So from there, you can just use your Visual Studio. Very simple process that you would have, similar process you would have done from a SharePoint perspective. You would have, you can just use your Visual Studio for that to deploy it, and you will deploy it as a full-blown solution. There you have to make some decisions as far as, okay, if you're moving from a like a dev to still a UAT, user acceptance testing, then you want to save it as still a unmanaged solution. Unmanaged means that you can still go in and tweak it, but if from a UAT you're moving into production, then you want to save it as a managed solution, which means you can't do any more tweaking over there. So the process is very simple and it's very straightforward. In fact, if you come from that SharePoint background, you've already done something like that. You've gone ahead and packaged all your farm level solutions or your site collection level solutions, same process, and it actually does align to a lot of what we saw over here, using all of these functionalities. Pro developer ones coming with Visual Studio and Visual Code. This is where you will start looking at it from the Azure DevOps standpoint, using these type of tools. So that is a whole session by itself, deep diving into that. There's actually some good Microsoft docs on this. So if you just go and Bing for something like that, you will get it. But just if you haven't already, start getting familiar with the concept of solutions, and you can build that solutions, package it together, and move it. It works with Power Apps, Power Automate. It has also started working for Power Virtual Agents, but the solutions for Power Apps and Power Automate is pretty tried and tested. So what else?
Perfect. And then someone else asked, what is the licensing model for Power Virtual Agents? It looks like it's free only when used within Teams with standalone connectors, while if it's used standalone, for example, to embed a SharePoint site, it is not.
I should have put it like no licensing questions in my session. No, I'm just kidding. So I mean, it is a fact. When you're using a standalone Power Virtual Agent, like the one I showed, the standalone Power Virtual Agent, then yes, you need a license for that. The license is more geared towards the maker of this, but again, that's a whole separate conversation. So in short, yes, you will need additional license for building Power Virtual Agents chatbots. And then you can go ahead and download the Power Apps, the Power Platform licensing guide. It's new iterations of that come out at least twice a year, so get the latest one. And over there, you'll get a full breakdown of, in this case, even though the SharePoint, the data source is the SharePoint list, which is a standard license, even though we are building a flow for a SharePoint list, it's standard license, because you're building a Power Virtual Agents on this side, it will go ahead and still need that additional Power Virtual Agents license. Now, if you don't want to use any license, do that inside Microsoft Teams. In Microsoft Teams, you don't pay for any additional license to build a bot system like that. But then you are bound inside the Microsoft Teams only. You will have to use it inside Microsoft Teams. And Reza and I are actually doing a session on that this Friday. So if you're interested, join us on that one, because we'll just be walking through both scenarios. I'm going to walk through building something like the in Power Virtual Agents, and then he's going to walk through building inside Teams. So if you're interested, join that one over there. But long story short, yes, you will need additional license from the Power Virtual Agent side, regardless of, even though the connector is standard. Since you're building a standalone chatbot, you will need a license for that.
Perfect. And then there's one last one. It's kind of an open-ended one. They're just asking, what are you most looking forward to about Microsoft Viva for using in your future projects, if anything? Like,
what am I looking forward to using Microsoft what?
Microsoft Viva connections.
Oh, Microsoft Viva. All right. So I'm not more on the Microsoft Viva side. My personal interest, I mean, if it was just asking me, I'm very interested in how it's AI is built into it for helping consolidate those sites together. One of the things I like about the Microsoft Viva is that it will help you design your site such that you can already have everything that is tied to what you are, whether you're your search criterias, what are the widgets and the content that you want to see. That's what that site will present. So it's very customized for either you or your department. And sure, it is, at the end of the day, it is SharePoint. It is baked into its managed metadata, which is the taggings and AI. It heavily regulates the search in the backend. It will heavily regulate AI in the backend. But the concept of customizing a site to either you or your department need doesn't get any better with Microsoft Viva. So that's my take on that. Again, I'm not a professional Microsoft Viva, so I'm not telling that from a here's what you need to do. I'm just telling that from an end user. Like, that's what gets me excited about using Microsoft Viva. So.
Perfect. Well, that appears to be all the questions today. So I just want to say thank you very much for joining us today, taking the time and sharing your knowledge and being a part of SharePoint Week. So we really appreciate it.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. And that's the end of today's webinar. So remember, you can join us tomorrow for an introduction to PowerShell and SharePoint. Thanks again to Daniel for joining us, and stay tuned and enjoy the rest of SharePoint Week. Thank you.